Hello, my name is CPorras, and this is the stolen life of Kaylee Anthony. On August 9, 2005, Casey Anthony gives birth to a baby girl by the name of Kaylee. Who knew that 2 years later they would both be the subjects of a high-profile case that would be all over media outlets, the victim being 2-year-old Kaylee Anthony and the defendant being her 21-year-old mother, Casey Anthony. The case begins with, on June 16, 2008, Kaylee Anthony is reported seen for the last time alive after visiting her grandparents. July 15, 2008, Kaylee is reported missing by her grandmother, Cindy Anthony. July 16, 2008, Casey Anthony is arrested for child neglect in which she tells police that her daughter's babysitter, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, vanished along with her daughter. July 17, 2008, law enforcement searched the vehicle of Casey Anthony, and a cadaver dog picks up a scent of human decomposition. August 27, 2008, it is determined that there were human remains in the trunk of Casey Anthony's vehicle by an air sample test done by the University of Tennessee Forensic Anthropology Center, Dr. Voss. September 24, 2008, a woman who has the same name as a supposed babysitter to Kaylee Anthony files a lawsuit against Casey Anthony for defamation. On October 14, 2008, a grand jury indicts Casey Anthony. December 11, 2008, skeletal remains are found nearby the Anthony's home. December 19, 2008, remains are identified as Kaylee Anthony. On April 13, 2009, prosecutors announced they will seek the death penalty at trial. May 9, 2011, jury selection has begun, in which takes place in Clearwater, Florida, instead of Orlando, Florida, where the crime was committed due to the high publicity of the case. May 24, 2011, trial begins and both sides give opening statements. According to Crime Museum, the prosecution stands for the theory that Casey Anthony murdered her daughter, while the defense argues that Kaylee died in an accidental drowning, and the reason it took a month to report the child missing was due to panic when Casey and her father, George, found the body. The charges filed against Casey Anthony include first-degree murder, the simple meaning of killing another human being, aggravated child abuse, which comes in part with the first charge due to the fact that first-degree murder is the killing of another human being in certain ways, and one of them includes aggravated child abuse. Aggravated manslaughter, this is determined when someone under the age of 18 is dead due to negligence, along with 4 counts of providing false information to police. If convicted of any of the first 3 charges, the defendant can face either life in prison or even the death sentence. This case will take place in a criminal trial in which the process includes, no matter it being a civil or criminal, the first thing that is needed is a crime to be reported, and in this case it is the disappearance of 2-year-old Kaylee Anthony. The next step is the investigation phase. Casey Anthony, the mother of Kaylee, is arrested and interrogated about the disappearance of her daughter, Kaylee Anthony. After this is a preliminary arraignment. This needs to take place hours after being arrested and taken to jail, in which the defendant is to first appear in front of a judge. The defendant is also presented with a formal affidavit. In this certain case, it includes Casey Anthony being filed with the charges of neglect. Immediately preceding the preliminary arraignment is a set of bail, in which case the bail for Casey Anthony was set at $500,000. And during the bail hearing, it is noted that evidence is presented to the judge of the cadaver dog picking up a human scent in the vehicle of the defendant. Next is the preliminary hearing, where both the defense attorney and the prosecutor appear in front of a judge to see if there is probable cause that a crime has been committed. After, the formal arraignment comes, where the state has officially become involved in the case. This is where a written document is given to Casey Anthony, with notice of all charges being filed against her, and a date is set for the pretrial, and a request from the defendant is sent for all the information the prosecutor may have. After that comes the pretrial activities, such as the time to present all motions possible, including a pretrial conference where a plea is the goal, and if a plea is not obtained, then a trial date is set. Now, before the trial takes place, both the prosecutor and the defense prepare their cases, and in the meantime a jury pool is brought in and the jury selection begins. Once all this has been accomplished, then the trial can begin. After both sides have been heard, the witnesses have given their statements, and the forensic experts have also given their statements, then the jury deliberate a verdict, and if applicable, the sentencing takes place. Now we will be going on to the attorney roles, and we will begin with the prosecutor. The prosecutor's role is to state the evidence to claim that the defendant did in fact commit the crime. They are going to give justice to the victim and their family. This pertains to the actus reus, due to the need for the prosecution to prove with facts that the crime was committed by the defendant. The prosecution is also the side who holds the burden of proof, due to the fact that they have to show evidence and facts that the crime was committed and done by the defendant. Evidence the prosecution claimed included: first, the car. This first came to light when Cynthia Anthony called 911 to report her granddaughter missing and that the car of her daughter, Casey Anthony, smelled like a dead body. Next comes the trunk odor. There was a smell of human decomposition and chloroform, along with hairs found in the trunk. Didn't have roots or tissue and therefore could only be tested for mitochondrial DNA, which determines that it has to be a family relative and female. Insects. In order to determine if the insects found in the trunk were because of the decomposed body being in there, they needed to actually find the insects and the remains together. Kaylee Anthony's body. The body was found 20 feet from the home of her grandparents. Along with that, the body was found with a blanket matching the bed sheets at the grandparents' home, laundry bags, and duct tape as well. The cause of death was undetermined, and statements from the medical examiner and forensic pathologist contraindicated one another. However, Dr. Jan Garvelia, a medical examiner, determined that death was a homicide but couldn't determine the exact cause of death. Although Dr. Werner Spitz, a forensic pathologist, also couldn't determine the cause of death, but didn't believe the victim was murdered. The computer. Digital forensics was brought in by the prosecution to determine that Casey Anthony had searched for chloroform recipes, but they couldn't place an exact person at the computer. The prosecution also claimed that Casey Anthony was a party girl and didn't want to have the burden of parenting anymore. Now we continue with the defense attorney. The main goal of the defense attorney is to make sure his client leaves the courtroom free of any crime. In this case, the mens reas were the defensive side due to the fact that Casey Anthony pleads not guilty. The defendant's side argued the case to have reasonable doubt. After the prosecutor had presented their case with the evidence, the defense had asked for a motion for acquittal, saying the prosecution hadn't met the burden of proof, but they were denied. In turn, the defendant continued with the case and argued their side. They determined that the trunk odor could also belong to trash that was found inside the vehicle, and that Dr. Voss' air test that determined the odor in the trunk was due to human remains was unreliable. For the plastic bag that Kaylee was found inside, Lori Gottesman found no match to the plastic bags to the ones in Anthony's home. Along with the skull evidence, it is shown that it had been tampered with by the person who found the remains, Roy Kronk, a meter reader, by poking the skull with a stick upon encountering it. Along with the cause of death, the fact that both expert witnesses contraindicated one another and couldn't determine an exact cause of death. To mention, with a computer, the defense lawyers argued that many people besides the defendant had access to the computer, and it could have been anyone who made the search for chloroform recipes. We continue with expert witnesses on the defense side. First off, an expert witness is one who has specialized knowledge in the area of practice that can be pertinent to criminal cases. Wendy J. Murphy, a former child abuse prosecutor who has many years of experience in child abuse cases, she was brought in to see if she can figure out why it took the defendant so long to report her daughter missing, in which her opinion Casey Anthony didn't call the police to the mere fact of being afraid. Lori Gottesman is a forensic specialist that works with all types of evidence from crime scenes and tries to tie them to the specific crime. In this case, Ms. Gottesman favored the defense by saying that the plastic bag where Katie's body was found were no match to the ones found in Anthony's home. Now to the expert witnesses on the prosecutor's side. Dr. Jan Gavelia is a medical examiner, the one who determines the cause of death and can also determine if the person died by homicide. In this case, Dr. Gavelia favored the prosecution side by saying that Kaylee Anthony's death had been by murder but couldn't find the exact cause of death. Another expert witness that could be seen in criminal cases includes advanced practice forensic nurse death investigators. Although there wasn't actually one in the Casey Anthony trial, it could be beneficial by them going to the crime scene and assisting in getting evidence, and then coming back to the medical examiner and helping them determine the cause of death and if it was murder or not. Case outcome. Once the prosecution had given their side and showed all the evidence to the jury, the defense followed by giving their last statement that included, even though the prosecution mentioned that Casey wanted to live a life of party, there was no indication that she would harm her daughter to get there. They also mentioned that Casey had no access to her car or her daughter on the 16th and 17th of July, in which she couldn't have committed the crime. And lastly, with a statement from Wendy J. Murphy, the former child abuse prosecutor, stating that it is possible that Casey Anthony was just afraid to report her daughter missing for the fear of not getting her back. With all the evidence that was shown, and along with the other expert witness testimonies, it was time for the jury to go back and deliberate a verdict. The verdict. After 10 hours of deliberation, the jury finally has a verdict. Casey Anthony is found not guilty on the charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter. She is, however, found guilty of the 4 counts of giving false information to the police. The judge sentenced Casey Anthony to 1 year in jail for each count, making it 4 years in jail and a $4,000 fine, with the judge also adding a total of $97,676.98 for all the expenses the state spent in the case. These are my references. Thank you.